Hi everyone. When I was going to college doing my IT degree, I would hear, interviews of people that work in the field, and the biggest thing I would hear them say is they're always learning. And I always really wondered, what does that mean exactly? So now that I get what it means from working, I'd like to actually explain it. So let me start by saying, in my workday, there are kind of three main modes. The first one is kind of meetings is the normal colloquial way to say it, but really it's more like you're trying to figure out what you're going to do. You're presented with needs and you are trying to think of how you're going to approach that problem and how you're going to solve it. Then there's actually solving the problem. And when I heard people say they're always learning, this is kind of what I thought they meant. Like anything that you do, as you do it, you'll get better at it. You're kind of learning by doing. And this is true, but it's true of a lot of things. So you do get better at whatever it is in IT you're doing by doing it more. But that's not quite what they mean when they say that. So from those two modes, for one reason or another, usually it comes from the meeting mode, from the figuring out what to do, the collaborating, that you realize that you need to do something that you don't know how to do. And that's what leads to kind of this third mode, that this mode is a bit more secondary to the first two, but that's the exploration mode. Now, the exploration mode can be super simple. It can be basically like you are looking into something and you find a plugin for the browser that's really good for doing this thing and you share it with everyone. So that was learning. You learned about this new technology that you can use. That's probably the simplest form. Beyond that, sometimes you will discover that you need something that you can't just learn in a day. And that's where you go from exploration mode to learning mode, where you are actually spending decent amounts of time becoming proficient in something that you don't know and no one else around you knows. That's one thing about working in an IT department is it's very easily possible to run into a need for a skill that you don't have and you're not going to hire someone to do. A lot of times it just makes more sense for you to actually learn it. Now I work in, I'm a software developer in an IT department, so this can be very true for where I work because software and a lot of other things have what's called technical debt. And this is why the always learning is a big part of this. So what technical debt is it kind of means if you get too far behind in technology, to save money, you're going to end up paying for that later. And let me be a little more granular on that point. So especially somewhere like an IT department, if you have a software application that does something and some technology comes around that's slightly better and you have the option to adapt to it or to actually rebuild towards it or to just not do anything, it's very tempting to just not do anything. Because you can look at what you currently have and you can say, well, it's doing what we want it to do just fine. Why would we change that? Especially if the only improvements to this newer technology are something like a sleeker or faster, user experience, where it's like, okay, it's going to save people a few milliseconds and it's going to cost us a lot of money. It's understandable to have this attitude, and sometimes it is the correct attitude. It's just not usually. The reason why it isn't usually the right attitude is because this tends to keep piling up. Once you make the decision to not keep up, the next time the decision comes up, it's more difficult to either rebuild or adapt. And so, you were already making the decision the first time that it wasn't worth it. The second time, you probably are certainly not going to think it's worth it. And you just keep making that decision until finally a day comes where there is actually functionality that you miss out on because you haven't kept with the times. For example, mobile. So there was a time where smartphones weren't really a thing. And as technology improved before the smartphone, it was easy to just say, hey, our interface works fine. Why do we want to make it, spend all this money just to make it a little bit sleeker and nicer and faster? And then one day the mobile phone came around and it wasn't too prolific, but still imagine that you're just sitting on your old UI, not worrying about anything. Then the day comes where what you're doing as an IT department, what you're providing, the service you're providing, They want to do it on mobile because everyone else can do it on mobile. Why can't we do it on mobile? You know, if I need to go take a picture of something with my phone, why can't I use your system? And so now all of a sudden there is a real need to improve upon this service, but with the current system, it's not anywhere near practical. The only way to make it happen is to knock it down and start from scratch. Now, I'm not saying that can't happen even when you are trying to keep up with the times, but it's a lot less likely and you'll have a lot less issues like this. So what really happens there is not just about the system, by the way. It's also about the people. Not only is your system old, but the people that work on your system, I mean, don't want to offend anybody, they might be physically old. It's not really about that. It's about the skill set they have is old. It is what we would consider to be outdated. Now, I'll do another video on having older skill sets. This can actually not be a bad thing for you personally in your career. There are people still writing COBOL out there because there are people that are so far under the technical debt, they have decided to stick with it. This is another reason technical debt can be bad, though, for an organization, because you will have to pay people more and more money as the skill set becomes more and more rare. So anyway, it's not just about upgrading your system. It's about getting your people to, up their skills. Some people aren't going to be able to make that leap. You may have to hire new people, and that leads to kind of this big expensive mess, is basically what happens. So a good IT department, except for a few exceptions, will be constantly learning. The employees working will be constantly learning. And sometimes that'll be a little thing like a new add-on that comes in, the language being upgraded version by version, some new feature comes in. Sometimes it will be larger, like we are moving to a different programming language entirely, and we are going to slowly migrate our systems. So this can be difficult. This is something that I wouldn't say I'm quite dealing with this, but I work in ServiceNow, and they have made a decision basically we were working in the old version of JavaScript up until now. I believe that's ES4, ES5. And the new ServiceNow UI is using ES6 JavaScript. So we are now being forced to make a big leap, and it's nothing that we can't handle. It's really nothing that we can't handle, but it is a lot of learning. I mean, I have been in mostly learning mode for the last 2 weeks, and I'm still just starting to get up the learning curve hill, basically. So this is a good thing, though. It means that I, as an employee where I work, can continue working there, and if I am able to keep up, which I'm sure I eventually will be, we will not have to go out and hire new people, and we will also not have to worry about the skill set, going the way of the wolves, because that's what can happen. So we are going to stay modern, and we are going to be able to cope with the new technologies that may really be necessary in the future. It's all good things. So if you're really wondering, though, what does it really mean like for me as an employee that I'm always learning? Well, most of the time it's the same old, same old. I learn what I need to know to do my job, and I do it. And I will do that for a while, and I will learn as I go. I will learn new tricks. I will stumble upon better ways of doing things in every way. And then every once in a while, something new comes up. Now, that might be something that is right down my alley. Then there's the other thing that comes out with exploration, that what if you figure out that you need something that is completely outside of your skill set? Well, then sometimes if it's doable for you as an individual, you learn that. So we had issues with source control, so I installed a GitLab server. I know my way around the command line, but I'm not a server admin, but I kind of taught myself how to do it. I looked up guides, I installed it. Not that familiar with source control at all, but learned as I went along. That's another thing that it means. So it's really 3 things that it means when people say in information technology, you are always learning. One is that just like a lot of other professions, you learn as you go. You get better at what you do as you do it. The second thing it means is that there are times that you have to make larger shifts, and you will actually spend your time almost as though you were in school again and learning new things until you start to become proficient. The third thing that it means is you might have to branch out sometimes and learn something that's outside of your area because, the necessity is there. So yeah, that's my best explanation of what it means to be always learning. Now, is it a huge burden? I would say no. Most of the time, you are more or less comfortable with what you're working with. So it's not as though it's, another day of class every day. But at the same time, there are days, weeks, even months that can be like that. So I hope you guys like this video. If you want to see more of this stuff, please subscribe to my channel. Have a good night.